The perfect family. The Henderson family looked perfect from the outside. Michael Henderson was a respected businessman in their small town of Millbrook. He drove an expensive car, wore nice suits, and always smiled at the neighbors. His wife Sarah worked as a nurse at the local hospital. Their daughter Emma was 8 years old with bright blue eyes and golden hair that bounced when she walked. Every Sunday, the Hendersons sat in the front row at church. Michael would put his arm around Sarah and hold Emma's hand during prayers. People in town often said they were the ideal family. The pastor even used them as an example of what a Christian family should look like. But behind the white picket fence and perfectly trimmed lawn, something dark was growing. Emma had started having nightmares. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, calling for her mother. Sarah would rush to her daughter's room, finding Emma curled up in the corner, shaking and crying. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Sarah would ask, sitting on the bed and stroking Emma's hair. Emma would just shake her head and whisper, "I can't tell you, Mommy. Daddy said bad things will happen if I tell." Sarah felt her heart race every time Emma said this. She tried to get more information, but Emma would clam up completely. The little girl would just stare at the wall with empty eyes, like she was seeing something terrible that wasn't there. At first, Sarah thought Emma was just going through a phase. Children sometimes had vivid imaginations and bad dreams, but as weeks passed, Emma's behavior got stranger. She stopped playing with her toys. She barely ate her food. She would flinch whenever Michael came near her, even when he was just trying to give her a normal hug. Michael noticed Emma's strange behavior too, but he had a different explanation. "She's probably just stressed about school," he would tell Sarah. "Kids go through these phases. She'll snap out of it." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She was a nurse and had seen enough children to know when something was seriously wrong. Emma wasn't just stressed about school. Something was terrifying her daughter, and it seemed to be connected to Michael somehow. Sarah started paying closer attention to the interactions between her husband and daughter. She noticed how Emma would tense up when Michael entered the room, how the little girl would make excuses to avoid being alone with her father, how Emma would suddenly become quiet and withdrawn after spending time with Michael. One evening, Sarah was working a late shift at the hospital when she got a call that would change everything. The caller ID showed it was from home, but when she answered, all she could hear was Emma's voice in the background. "Daddy, please." Emma was crying. "I don't want to."
"Please don't make me."
Then the line went dead. Sarah's hands were shaking as she tried to call back. The phone rang and rang, but nobody answered. She told her supervisor she had a family emergency and rushed home as fast as she could. Her mind was racing with terrible possibilities. When she pulled into the driveway, the house looked normal from the outside. All the lights were on and Michael's car was in the garage. But Sarah's instincts told her something was very wrong. She had heard the fear in Emma's voice on that phone call. Sarah used her key to enter quietly through the front door. The house was eerily silent. She called out, "Emma? Michael, I'm home." No answer. She walked through the living room and kitchen, but they were empty. Then she heard a sound coming from upstairs. It was Emma crying, but it was muffled, like she was trying to be quiet about it. Sarah climbed the stairs slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The crying was coming from Emma's bedroom. She approached the door and noticed it was closed, which was unusual. Emma always kept her door open at night because she was afraid of the dark. Sarah pressed her ear against the door and listened. She could hear Emma sniffling and Michael's voice speaking in low tones. She couldn't make out the words, but his tone sounded different than usual. It wasn't the loving father voice he used in public. It was commanding and stern. Sarah's maternal instincts kicked into high gear. Something was happening to her daughter behind that closed door, and she was going to find out what it was. She reached for the door handle, not knowing that what she was about to discover would shatter her world completely. The discovery, Sarah turned the door handle as quietly as possible and pushed it open just a crack. What she saw through that small opening made her blood run cold. Michael was sitting on Emma's bed and Emma was pressed against the wall, her small body trembling with fear. The little girl's pajamas were disheveled and tears were streaming down her face. Michael was holding something in his hand, and he was speaking to Emma in a voice Sarah had never heard before. It was threatening and cold. "You know what happens to little girls who don't listen to their daddies," he was saying. "Bad things happen to their mommies. You don't want mommy to get hurt, do you?" Emma shook her head frantically, her eyes wide with terror. "No, Daddy, please don't hurt Mommy. I'll be good." "I promise I'll be good." Sarah felt like she was going to be sick. Her own husband was threatening their daughter and using Sarah's safety as leverage. But leverage for what? What was he making Emma do? She watched in horror as Michael moved closer to Emma. "That's my good girl," he said, his voice becoming sickeningly sweet. "Now remember, this is our special secret. If you ever tell anyone about our games, something terrible will happen to Mommy. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, but she was crying harder now. "I understand, Daddy. I won't tell. Please don't hurt Mommy." Michael reached out and touched Emma's face, wiping away her tears. The gesture looked gentle from the outside, but Sarah could see how Emma recoiled from his touch. Her daughter was afraid of her own father. Sarah's mind was racing. She needed to get Emma away from Michael right now, but she also needed evidence of what was happening. If she burst in without proof, Michael could deny everything and claim Emma was just having nightmares. As a nurse, Sarah knew how these situations worked in court. Without evidence, it would be his word against a child's. She pulled out her phone and started recording through the crack in the door. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the device steady, but she managed to capture Michael's voice as he continued to threaten Emma. "Now," Michael was saying, "I want you to do exactly what Daddy tells you to do. And remember, if you're not a good girl, Mommy might have an accident at work. You wouldn't want that, would you?" Emma's sobs became louder. "Please, Daddy, I don't want to. It makes me feel sick." "Shh," Michael said, putting his finger to his lips. "Good girls don't complain. Good girls do what their daddies tell them to do." Sarah had heard enough. She couldn't stand there and watch her daughter suffer for one more second. She pushed the door open wide and stepped into the room. "Get away from her," Sarah shouted, her voice filled with rage and desperation. Michael spun around, his face showing genuine shock for the first time. He clearly hadn't expected Sarah to come home early. For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in headlights. Emma immediately ran to her mother, wrapping her small arms around Sarah's legs and crying into her scrubs. "Mommy, you're okay. Daddy said you might get hurt." Sarah picked up Emma and held her tight, never taking her eyes off Michael. "What did you do to her?" she demanded. "What have you been doing to my daughter?" Michael's expression quickly changed from shock to his usual charming smile. But Sarah could see right through it now. "Sarah, honey, you're overreacting. Emma just had another nightmare and I was comforting her. You know how she's been lately." "Don't you dare lie to me," Sarah said, her voice low and dangerous. "I heard what you said to her. I recorded it." Michael's smile faltered for just a second, but then he laughed. It was a cold, calculating laugh that made Sarah's skin crawl. "You recorded what exactly? A father comforting his upset daughter?" "Sarah, I think the stress of work is getting to you." But Sarah wasn't falling for his manipulation anymore. Too many things made sense now. Emma's nightmares, her strange behavior, the way she flinched from Michael's touch. Her daughter had been trying to tell her something was wrong, and Sarah had missed all the signs. "We're leaving," Sarah said, backing toward the door with Emma still in her arms. "Right now." Michael stood up slowly, and Sarah noticed how he seemed to grow larger and more threatening. "You're not taking my daughter anywhere," he said, his mask finally slipping completely. "Emma belongs to me. She's mine." The way he said mine made Sarah realize this was far worse than she had imagined. Michael wasn't just emotionally abusing Emma. The look in his eyes, the possessive way he spoke about her, the fear in Emma's reaction to him, it all pointed to something much darker. Sarah clutched Emma tighter and moved toward the bedroom door. "Stay away from us," she warned. "I'm calling the police," Michael laughed again. "And tell them what? That you think your husband is a monster?" "Sarah, I'm a respected businessman in this community. I have friends in the police department, friends at the courthouse, friends everywhere that matter. Who do you think they're going to believe?" His words sent a chill down Sarah's spine because she knew he was right. Michael had spent years building his reputation as the perfect family man. He had connections throughout the town. If it came down to his word against hers, especially with just a recording of what could be interpreted as a father comforting his child, she might not win. But looking down at Emma's tear-stained face, Sarah knew she had to try. Her daughter was depending on her to be strong, to protect her from the monster who had been hiding behind the mask of a loving father. "Watch me," Sarah said, and she ran from the room with Emma in her arms, determined to save her daughter no matter what it cost her. The escaped Sarah ran down the stairs with Emma clinging to her neck. Behind them, she could hear Michael's heavy footsteps following. Her car keys were on the kitchen counter, and she grabbed them while trying to keep Emma secure in her arms. Sarah, stop being ridiculous, Michael called out, but his voice had an edge of panic now. Come back here so we can talk about this like adults. Sarah didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to get Emma as far away from this house as possible. She fumbled with the front door lock, her hands shaking so badly she could barely turn the key. Mommy, I'm scared, Emma whispered into her ear. I know, baby, Sarah whispered back. But Mommy's going to keep you safe now. I promise. Finally, the door opened and Sarah rushed outside into the cool night air. She ran to her car and struggled to open the back door while still holding Emma. She could see Michael in the doorway, watching them, but not following. He was too smart to make a scene where the neighbors might see. Sarah buckled Emma into her car seat as quickly as possible. The little girl was still crying, but more quietly now. Where are we going, Mommy? Somewhere safe, Sarah said, starting the engine. We're going somewhere Daddy can't find us tonight. As she backed out of the driveway, Sarah could see Michael standing in the doorway, his silhouette dark against the light from inside the house. Even from a distance, she could feel his anger. She knew this wasn't over. Michael wasn't the type of man who would just let his family walk away. Sarah drove through the quiet streets of Millbrook, her mind racing. Where could she take Emma? Not to her parents' house. Michael knew where they lived. Not to her sister's place either. Michael was charming and manipulative. He could convince Sarah's family that she was having some kind of breakdown. Then she remembered Dr. Martinez, a colleague from the hospital who had become a friend over the years. Dr. Martinez had always been kind to Sarah, and more importantly, she specialized in child psychology. She would understand the situation and know how to help. Sarah drove to Dr. Martinez's house, hoping she would be home even though it was almost 10 o'clock at night. She parked in the driveway and carried Emma to the front door. Emma had finally stopped crying, but she was exhausted and clinging to Sarah like a lifeline. Dr. Martinez answered the door in her robe, looking surprised to see them. Sarah, what's wrong? Is everything okay? No, Sarah said, and then she started crying. All the fear and shock of the evening hit her at once. Everything is very wrong. I need help. Emma needs help. Dr. Martinez immediately invited them inside. She made hot chocolate for Emma and tea for Sarah, then sat down to listen to the whole story. Sarah told her everything. Emma's nightmares, the strange behavior, the phone call, what she had witnessed in Emma's bedroom. I recorded some of it, Sarah said, showing Dr. Martinez the video on her phone, but I don't know if it's enough. Michael is right about one thing. He has a lot of influence in this town. Dr. Martinez watched the recording with a serious expression. Then she turned to Emma, who was curled up on the couch with a blanket looking tiny and vulnerable. Emma, Dr. Martinez said gently, can you tell me about the games your daddy wanted you to play? Emma looked at her mother first as if asking permission. Sarah nodded encouragingly. It's okay, sweetheart. Dr. Martinez is here to help us. Daddy said they were special games, Emma said in a small voice. But they made me feel sick and scared. He said I couldn't tell anyone because bad things would happen to Mommy if I did. Dr. Martinez asked more gentle questions, and slowly, Emma began to reveal the truth. The games Michael had been forcing her to play were not games at all. They were acts of abuse that no child should ever have to endure. Sarah felt sick listening to her daughter's innocent voice describe things that were so horrifically wrong. Emma, you were very brave to tell us, Dr. Martinez said. And you're safe now. Your mommy is going to make sure nothing bad happens to you again. Dr. Martinez pulled Sarah aside while Emma was distracted by a coloring book. Sarah, this is serious. Emma shows clear signs of ongoing sexual abuse. We need to get her to the hospital for an examination, and we need to call the police tonight. Sarah's worst fears were confirmed. Her husband, the man she had shared a bed with, the man she had trusted with their daughter, was a monster. She felt guilty for not seeing the signs sooner, but Dr. Martinez reassured her. These predators are experts at hiding what they do, Dr. Martinez said. They're manipulative and charming. You're not to blame for this. Sarah, the important thing is that you discovered it and you're taking action now. Dr. Martinez made the necessary phone calls while Sarah held Emma. A social worker would meet them at the hospital, along with a police officer who specialized in cases involving children. The examination would be difficult, but it was necessary to gather evidence. What about Michael? Sarah asked. He said he has friends in the police department. That may be true, Dr. Martinez said. But not all of them. Officer Jennifer Walsh is the one coming tonight, and I know her personally. She's a good cop and a mother herself. She won't be influenced by Michael's connections. As they prepared to leave for the hospital, Emma looked up at her mother with those big blue eyes. "Mommy, are you really going to keep me safe from Daddy?" Sarah knelt down and took Emma's small hands in hers. "Yes, baby. I promise you Daddy will never hurt you again. I'm going to make sure of it." It was a big promise, and Sarah wasn't sure how she was going to keep it. Michael was powerful and connected in their small town. But looking at her daughter's trusting face, Sarah knew she would fight with everything she had to protect Emma. The scared little girl had already been through too much. Now it was time for the adults to step up and make sure justice was served. The investigation, the hospital examination, was difficult for everyone involved. Emma was scared and confused, not understanding why strangers needed to look at her body. Sarah held her daughter's hand throughout the process, whispering words of comfort and encouragement. Officer Jennifer Walsh was exactly what Dr. Martinez had promised. Professional but gentle, experienced but compassionate. She had seen cases like this before, and she knew how to talk to children in a way that didn't make them feel scared or blamed. "Emma, you're being so brave," Officer Walsh said as the medical examination concluded. "I want you to know that none of this was your fault. Sometimes adults do bad things, and it's never the child's fault." The medical evidence supported Emma's story. Dr. Peterson, the pediatrician who conducted the examination, spoke to Sarah privately afterward. "The physical evidence is consistent with ongoing abuse," she said gently. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. But the good news is that Emma is going to recover from this. Children are resilient, and with proper counseling and support, she can heal." Officer Walsh took Sarah's statement and reviewed the recording she had made on her phone. "This is good evidence," she said. "But I want to prepare you for what's coming next. We'll need to arrest Michael tonight, but he'll probably be released on bail by tomorrow morning. Men like him usually have good lawyers and community support." Sarah's heart sank. "So he'll be free to come after us?" "We'll get a protective order in place immediately," Officer Walsh assured her. "And I'm going to recommend that you and Emma stay somewhere safe for a while." "Do you have family out of town?" Sarah thought about her brother David, who lived 3 hours away in the city. They hadn't been close in recent years, but she knew he would help if she explained the situation. "My brother might let us stay with him for a while." "Good. The farther away from Michael, the better, at least until the trial." Officer Walsh left to obtain an arrest warrant while Sarah called her brother. David was shocked by the news but didn't hesitate to offer his spare bedroom for as long as they needed it. 2 hours later, Officer Walsh called with an update. "We arrested Michael at his office this morning," she said. He was calm and cooperative, which is typical for these types of offenders. "They often act like they've done nothing wrong." "What did he say?" Sarah asked. "He denied everything, of course. Said you were having mental health issues and that Emma was making up stories. He's already called his lawyer, James Morrison, one of the most expensive defense attorneys in the state." Sarah felt her stomach drop. James Morrison was famous for getting wealthy clients out of trouble, no matter what they had done. Michael was clearly taking this seriously and preparing for a fight. "Sarah," Officer Walsh continued, "there's something else you need to know. When we searched your house, we found some disturbing items in Michael's home office. A camera, some photographs, and files on his computer. The evidence suggests this abuse has been going on for a long time and he was documenting it." Sarah felt sick. Not only had Michael been abusing Emma, but he had been taking pictures and videos of it. The thought of what her daughter had endured, and that Michael had been treating it like some kind of twisted hobby, was almost too much to bear. "The good news," Officer Walsh said, "is that this gives us very strong evidence against him. It's going to be much harder for his lawyer to claim this was just a misunderstanding." Dr. Martinez had arranged for Emma to see a child psychologist immediately. During the session, Emma revealed even more details about what Michael had been doing to her. The psychologist, Dr. Kim, was experienced in these cases and knew how to help Emma process her trauma. "Emma is going to need ongoing therapy," Dr. Kim told Sarah afterward. "But she's a strong little girl and she trusts you completely. That's going to be crucial for her recovery." Sarah packed their belongings while Emma napped at Dr. Martinez's house. Being back in the house where so much horror had taken place made her feel nauseated. She moved quickly through the rooms, grabbing clothes and essential items. She avoided looking at the family photos on the walls. Those happy images felt like lies now. As she was packing Emma's toys, she noticed something that made her pause. Emma's favorite stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppy, was hidden behind other toys in the closet. Emma always slept with Mr. Hoppy. Why would he be hidden away like that? Sarah picked up the rabbit and felt something odd inside it. There was a small hard object sewn into the fabric. Using scissors, she carefully opened a seam and found a tiny recording device. Her blood ran cold as she realized what this meant. Michael hadn't just been abusing Emma. He had been recording it with devices hidden in her toys and around her room. The man she had married and trusted was not just a predator. He was a calculating criminal who had been systematically documenting his crimes. Sarah immediately called Officer Walsh and reported the discovery. "We'll need to search the entire house again," Officer Walsh said. If he hid one recording device, there might be more. The second search revealed 4 more hidden cameras and recording devices throughout Emma's room and the adjoining bathroom. The evidence against Michael was now overwhelming. There would be no way for even the best lawyer to explain away video evidence of him abusing his own daughter. That evening, Sarah and Emma drove to David's house in the city. Emma was quiet during the trip, staring out the window as familiar sights gave way to unfamiliar ones. "Are we ever going home, Mommy?" Emma asked as they pulled into David's driveway. Sarah looked at her daughter in the rearview mirror. Home was supposed to be a place where you felt safe and loved. The house they had left behind would never feel like home again, not after what had happened there. "We're going to find a new home," Sarah told Emma. "A place where we can be safe and happy together." Emma nodded solemnly. Even at 8 years old, she seemed to understand that their old life was over. They were starting fresh, and while the road ahead would be difficult, they would face it together. David welcomed them with open arms and immediately set about making Emma feel comfortable in her new temporary home. But even as Sarah tried to focus on getting Emma settled, she knew the hardest part was still ahead of them. Michael would fight the charges, and they would have to relive this nightmare in court. The man who had once promised to love and protect their family was now their enemy, and Sarah would have to be stronger than she had ever been to ensure he faced justice for what he had done. The fight for justice. Michael was released on bail 3 days after his arrest, just as Officer Walsh had predicted. The judge had set bail at $500,000, which would have been impossible for most people to pay. But Michael had wealthy friends and business connections who helped him post bond. The news of Michael's arrest sent shockwaves through Millbrook. The perfect family man, the respected businessman, the devoted father. It was all revealed to be a carefully constructed lie. But the community's reaction was split. Some people were horrified and supported Sarah completely. Others couldn't believe the accusations and thought Michael was being framed. "I've known Michael Henderson for 15 years, one neighbor told a local reporter. He coached Little League baseball and volunteered at the church fundraisers. This has to be some kind of mistake." These comments made Sarah furious, but District Attorney Patricia Hoffman warned her to expect this kind of response. "Unfortunately, it's very common in cases like this," DA Hoffman explained during their first meeting. "Predators often choose public roles that make them appear trustworthy. When they're exposed, people don't want to believe they were fooled." DA Hoffman was a tough prosecutor with a strong track record in child abuse cases. She reviewed all the evidence against Michael and felt confident about getting a conviction. "The hidden cameras and recording devices are going to be crucial," she told Sarah. "It shows premeditation and a pattern of behavior. This wasn't a one-time incident or a momentary lapse in judgment." But Michael's lawyer, James Morrison, was already working to discredit the evidence. He filed motions claiming that Sarah had planted the devices herself as part of an elaborate scheme to frame her husband. He argued that Sarah was mentally unstable and had coached Emma to make false accusations. "It's ridiculous," Sarah told Dr. Martinez during one of their regular check-ins. "How could I have coached an 8-year-old to describe things she shouldn't even know about?" "Unfortunately, defense attorneys will try anything," Dr. Martinez replied. "But Emma's testimony is very credible. Children don't lie about these things in the detailed way she has described." Emma was struggling with the aftermath of the trauma. She had good days and bad days. Sometimes she seemed like a normal little girl, playing with toys and laughing at cartoons. Other times she would have panic attacks or nightmares that left her sobbing and afraid. The child psychologist, Dr. Kim, explained that this was normal for trauma survivors. Emma is processing a lot of complex emotions, she told Sarah. She's dealing with fear, confusion, and even guilt. Many children blame themselves for what happened to them. Sarah made sure Emma understood that none of this was her fault. Bad people sometimes do bad things, she would tell her daughter. But that doesn't mean the children they hurt did anything wrong. Meanwhile, the legal battle was intensifying. Morrison had hired private investigators to dig into Sarah's background, looking for anything they could use to discredit her. They questioned her co-workers at the hospital, trying to find people who would say she was unstable or had problems at work. They're desperate, D.A. Hoffman told Sarah. When the evidence is this strong, the only strategy left is to attack the victim's credibility. The private investigators also approached Sarah's family members, including her brother David. They offered him money to say that Sarah had always been unstable, or that she had coached Emma to make false accusations. David was disgusted by the offer. "I told them to get off my property before I called the police," he told Sarah. "How dare they try to bribe me to lie about my own sister and niece?" But not everyone was as loyal as David. Michael's friends and business associates were rallying around him, raising money for his legal defense and making statements to the media about what a good man he was. They painted Sarah as a vindictive ex-wife trying to destroy an innocent man. The worst part was when some of these people approached Emma directly. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly neighbor who had always been friendly to the family, saw Emma at the grocery store with David and made a comment that devastated the little girl. "I hope you know what you're doing to your poor daddy," Mrs. Patterson said to Emma. "He's a good man, and these lies are going to ruin his life." Emma burst into tears and clung to David's leg. When they got home, she asked Sarah, "Mommy, am I telling lies about Daddy?" Mrs. Patterson said I was. Sarah felt her heart break all over again. Her 8-year-old daughter was being blamed by adults for reporting her own abuse. "No, sweetheart," Sarah said firmly. "You are telling the truth, and I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell it. Some adults don't understand, but that doesn't mean you did anything wrong." Dr. Kim warned Sarah that this community pressure could be very damaging to Emma's recovery. "She needs to feel supported and believed," Dr. Kim explained. "When adults question her story, it makes her doubt herself and feel guilty." Sarah decided they needed to move further away from Millbrook, at least temporarily. David helped her find an apartment in a neighborhood where no one knew their story. Emma could start at a new school where she wouldn't be pointed at and whispered about as that girl whose father was arrested. The new school was understanding about Emma's situation. The principal, Mrs. Rodriguez, had experience with children who were dealing with trauma. She made sure Emma's teachers knew to watch for signs of distress and to provide extra support when needed. Slowly, Emma began to adjust to their new life. She made friends at school and started to smile more often. But the approaching trial date loomed over everything. Emma would have to testify about what Michael had done to her, and Sarah was terrified about how that would affect her daughter's healing process. D.A. Hoffman did everything she could to make the testimony process easier for Emma. They would use a special room where Emma could testify via video link, so she wouldn't have to face Michael directly in the courtroom. A victim advocate would be with Emma throughout the process to provide support. "Emma is our strongest witness," D.A. Hoffman told Sarah. "Her testimony, combined with the physical evidence and the recordings, will be very powerful. But I want to prepare you. Morrison is going to try to trip her up during cross-examination." Sarah felt sick thinking about a grown man trying to confuse and intimidate her daughter on the witness stand. But Emma surprised everyone with her strength and determination. "I want to tell the truth about Daddy," Emma told Dr. Kim during a therapy session. "I don't want him to hurt other little girls like he hurt me." At 8 years old, Emma had more courage than most adults. She understood that testifying would be scary, but she was willing to do it to make sure Michael faced consequences for his actions. Sarah had never been more proud of her daughter and more determined to see justice served. The trial. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in January. Sarah sat in the front row of the courtroom, wearing her best business suit and trying to look stronger than she felt. Behind her, she could hear Michael's supporters whispering among themselves. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious townspeople, and families from both sides. Michael looked nothing like the monster she now knew him to be. He wore an expensive navy blue suit and had gotten a fresh haircut for the trial. His lawyer had clearly coached him on how to appear, concerned but innocent. a loving father who couldn't understand how his family had turned against him. Judge Helen Morrison, no relation to Michael's lawyer, was known for running a tight courtroom and having zero tolerance for games during child abuse cases. She had been a prosecutor herself before becoming a judge, and she understood the complexities of these types of cases. D.A. Hoffman's opening statement was clear and direct. She outlined the evidence they would present: Emma's testimony, the medical examination, the hidden recording devices, and the video evidence found on Michael's computer. She painted a picture of a calculated predator who had been systematically abusing his daughter while maintaining a perfect public image. The defendant is not the man his friends and neighbors think he is, D.A. Hoffman told the jury. Behind closed doors, away from the community that respected him, Michael Henderson was terrorizing his own child and documenting her suffering for his own twisted gratification. James Morrison's opening statement took a completely different approach. He acknowledged that something terrible had happened to Emma, but he claimed that Michael was not responsible. Instead, he suggested that Sarah had been abusing Emma herself and had framed Michael when she realized she might get caught. Sarah Henderson is a troubled woman who saw her perfect life slipping away, Morrison told the jury. Rather than face the consequences of her own actions, she has coached her daughter to tell lies about her father and even planted evidence to support her story. Sarah felt sick listening to these accusations. The idea that anyone could believe she would hurt Emma and then blame Michael was horrible. But she could see some jury members nodding along with Morrison's theory. The defense was counting on people's reluctance to believe that a respected community member could be capable of such evil. The prosecution's case began with Officer Walsh testifying about her investigation. She described the night Sarah had called for help, the evidence found in the house, and Michael's behavior when he was arrested. Under cross-examination, Morrison tried to make her admit that Sarah could have planted the recording devices herself. Officer Walsh, isn't it true that Sarah Henderson had access to the house and could have placed those devices at any time? Morrison asked. That's technically possible, Officer Walsh admitted, but the devices were sophisticated and had been in place for months based on the data we recovered. It would be very unlikely for someone without technical expertise to install them. Dr. Peterson, the pediatrician who had examined Emma, testified about the medical evidence. She explained in clinical terms what the examination had revealed, speaking carefully to protect Emma's privacy while still conveying the severity of what had been done to her. The physical evidence was consistent with ongoing sexual abuse over an extended period. Dr. Peterson testified. The injuries and scarring patterns indicated repeated trauma, not a single incident. Morrison's cross-examination was aggressive. He questioned Dr. Peterson's experience and suggested that the injuries could have been caused by other factors. But Dr. Peterson stood firm in her assessment, explaining that she had examined hundreds of abuse cases and was confident in her findings. The most difficult part of the trial came when Emma had to testify. Sarah's heart broke watching her brave little daughter walk into the special witness room, accompanied by the victim advocate. Emma looked so small in the big chair, but she held her head up and spoke clearly into the microphone. D.A. Hoffman questioned Emma gently, asking her to describe what her father had done to her. Emma's answers were heartbreaking but clear. She used simple words that an 8-year-old would know, describing things no child should ever have to experience. He said it was our special game, Emma testified, her voice barely above a whisper, but it hurt and it made me feel sick. I wanted to tell Mommy, but Daddy said bad things would happen to her if I did. Emma described the threats Michael had made, the way he had used her love for her mother to keep her silent. She talked about the camera he would set up and how he would watch the videos later on his computer. When it was Morrison's turn for cross-examination, he was much gentler than he had been with the adult witnesses. He knew that being too aggressive with a child would backfire with the jury. Instead, he tried to confuse Emma about dates and details, hoping to make her testimony seem unreliable. Emma, you said this happened on a Tuesday, but last week you told the detective it was a Wednesday. Which day was it really? Morrison asked. Emma looked confused and started to cry. I don't remember what day it was. I just remember it happened. D.A. Hoffman objected, pointing out that expecting a traumatized 8-year-old to remember specific dates was unreasonable. Judge Morrison sustained the objection and warned the defense attorney to be more appropriate in his questioning. The technical evidence was presented by FBI computer experts who had analyzed Michael's devices. They found hundreds of images and videos that Michael had taken of Emma over the course of 2 years. The jury members looked sick as the evidence was described. Though the actual images were not shown in open court, the metadata on these files shows they were created over a 24-month period. The expert testified, the defendant used sophisticated equipment to record and store this material, suggesting this was not impulsive behavior but planned and systematic abuse. Morrison tried to argue that the computer evidence had been tampered with, but the FBI expert's testimony was solid. The chain of custody had been properly maintained, and there was no credible way the evidence could have been planted. Sarah testified about the night she discovered what was happening to Emma. She described Michael's threats, his attempt to manipulate her, and the fear in Emma's eyes. Under cross-examination, Morrison painted her as an unstable woman who was jealous of Michael's success and had orchestrated the entire situation. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Henderson, that you were taking antidepressants and had been seeing a therapist for marital problems?" Morrison asked. "I was getting help for stress related to my job at the hospital," Sarah replied firmly. "That doesn't make me unstable, and it certainly doesn't mean I would hurt my daughter." The defense case was weak. Morrison called character witnesses who testified about Michael's good reputation in the community, but none of them had witnessed his private interactions with Emma. He also brought in a psychologist who suggested that Emma's testimony showed signs of coaching, but the expert admitted under cross-examination that she had never actually examined Emma. Michael himself chose not to testify, which was his legal right, but sent a message to the jury. If he was truly innocent, why wouldn't he tell his side of the story? The closing arguments were emotional. D.A. Hoffman reminded the jury that predators often hide behind respectable facades, and that the evidence against Michael was overwhelming. Morrison made one last attempt to convince the jury that Sarah was the real abuser, but his arguments felt desperate and unconvincing. Judge Morrison gave the jury careful instructions about the law and the burden of proof. Sarah watched the 12 men and women file out to deliberate, knowing that Emma's future and Michael's fate was now in their hands. The wait was agonizing. Sarah paced the courthouse hallways, supported by David and Dr. Martinez. Emma was staying with a family friend during the deliberations, shielded from the stress and media attention surrounding the trial. After 6 hours, the jury sent word that they had reached a verdict. Sarah's hands were shaking as she took her seat in the courtroom. Michael sat at the defense table, his confident mask finally showing cracks. He looked older and smaller than he had at the beginning of the trial. The foreman stood up when asked for the verdict. "On the charge of aggravated sexual abuse of a minor, we find the defendant guilty." Sarah collapsed into tears of relief. Behind her, she could hear gasps and crying from Michael's supporters. But the foreman wasn't finished. "On the charge of possession of child pornography, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of use of a minor in sexual performance, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts." Michael's carefully constructed life was finally crumbling around him. As the bailiff placed handcuffs on his wrists, he looked back at Sarah with pure hatred in his eyes. But Sarah wasn't afraid anymore. Justice had been served, and Emma was finally safe. New beginnings. 3 months after the trial ended, Sarah received a letter in the mail. The return address made her hands shake. It was from the state prison where Michael was serving his sentence. For a moment, she considered throwing it away without opening it. But something made her tear open the envelope and read the contents. The letter was short and written in Michael's familiar handwriting. It contained no apology, no admission of guilt, no expression of remorse for what he had done to Emma. Instead, it was filled with threats and blame. He claimed the conviction was a mistake and that he would appeal until he was free. He blamed Sarah for destroying their family and promised that someday she would pay for what she had done to him. Sarah crumpled the letter and threw it in the trash. Then she called Officer Walsh to report it. Prisoners weren't supposed to contact their victims, and this violation would add time to Michael's sentence. More importantly, it showed that Michael still didn't understand or accept responsibility for his crimes. "Some offenders never take responsibility," Officer Walsh explained. "They continue to see themselves as the victim even after conviction. The important thing is that he can't hurt Emma anymore." Emma was slowly healing, though the process wasn't easy. She still had nightmares sometimes, and certain things could trigger memories of the abuse. But with Dr. Kim's help and Sarah's constant support, she was learning to be a child again. The new school had been wonderful for Emma. Her teacher, Ms. Johnson, was patient and understanding. She never pushed Emma to talk about her past, but she was always available if Emma needed someone to listen. Emma had made several close friends who knew nothing about her history and simply accepted her as she was. "I like my new school," Emma told Sarah one evening as they were reading bedtime stories together. "Nobody asks me sad questions and I can just be normal." Normal was exactly what Sarah wanted for her daughter. They had developed new routines and traditions that had nothing to do with their old life in Millbrook. Saturday mornings were for pancakes and cartoons. Sunday afternoons were for trips to the park or the library. Simple pleasures that helped Emma remember what childhood was supposed to feel like. Sarah had also started the healing process for herself. She had joined a support group for parents of abused children, where she met other mothers who understood what she was going through. The guilt she felt for not recognizing the signs sooner was slowly being replaced by pride in her strength and determination to protect Emma. "You saved your daughter," one mother in the support group told her. "You listened when she tried to tell you and you acted immediately. Not every child is that lucky." Sarah had also started dating again, though very cautiously. Emma's well-being was her first priority, and she wouldn't bring anyone into their lives unless she was absolutely certain they could be trusted. Dr. Kim had advised her to take things slowly and to involve Emma in any decisions about new relationships. The legal battle wasn't completely over. Michael had indeed filed an appeal, claiming his trial lawyer had been incompetent and that new evidence would prove his innocence. But D.A. Hoffman was confident the conviction would stand. "Appeal courts rarely overturn cases with this much evidence," she told Sarah. "And even if they did order a new trial, we would prosecute him again and get the same result." Michael's appeal also gave Sarah the opportunity to pursue a civil lawsuit against him. She could sue for damages related to Emma's medical treatment, therapy costs, and the pain and suffering he had caused. The money would help ensure Emma had access to whatever treatment she needed for years to come. "He destroyed our sense of security and forced us to rebuild our entire lives," Sarah's civil attorney explained. "The law recognizes that victims deserve compensation for those damages." Emma's progress in therapy was remarkable. Dr. Kim used play therapy and art therapy to help Emma process her trauma in age-appropriate ways. Slowly, Emma was learning to separate the bad things her father had done from her own sense of self-worth. "Emma is showing incredible resilience," Dr. Kim told Sarah during one of their regular check-ins. "She's learning to trust again and to see herself as a survivor rather than a victim." One day, Emma drew a picture during art therapy that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. It showed a house with a bright yellow sun, flowers in the garden, and two stick figures labeled Mommy and Emma holding hands and smiling. There was no third figure in the picture. Their family of two was complete and happy. "I drew our new house," Emma explained to Sarah that evening. "It's just you and me, and we're safe and happy." Sarah had indeed been looking at houses in their new city. The apartment was temporary, and she wanted Emma to have a real home again, a place where they could make new memories and put down roots. She found a small house in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and friendly neighbors. The house had a big backyard where Emma could play safely, and it was close enough to David's house that he could visit regularly. Emma's uncle had become an important male figure in her life, showing her that not all men were dangerous and that some could be trusted to love and protect her. Moving into their new house was emotional for both of them. Emma helped Sarah unpack boxes and decide where everything should go. They hung Emma's artwork on the refrigerator and put family photos on the mantel. Pictures of Emma and Sarah, Emma and David, Emma with her new friends. No pictures of Michael remained. The first night in the new house, Emma crawled into bed with Sarah. "Mommy, are we really safe here?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said, holding her daughter close. "We're safe here. Daddy can't find us, and even if he could, there are laws that keep him away from us." "Good," Emma said, settling against her mother's shoulder. "I like our new life." Sarah did too. It wasn't the life she had planned when she married Michael and started a family, but it was honest and real in a way their old life had never been. There were no more lies, no more secrets, no more fear hiding behind a perfect facade. As the months passed, Emma continued to grow stronger and more confident. She joined the school choir and discovered she had a beautiful singing voice. She made the honor roll in her class and was selected to represent her school in a regional art competition. She was becoming the happy, healthy child she was meant to be. Sarah also found new purpose in her life. She began volunteering with organizations that helped other families dealing with child abuse. She spoke at conferences for medical professionals about recognizing the signs of abuse and supporting families through the reporting process. Your experience, as painful as it was, can help save other children, Dr. Martinez told her. You have a unique perspective that can make a real difference. On the 1-year anniversary of Michael's conviction, Sarah and Emma visited the courthouse where justice had been served. They didn't go inside, but they stood on the steps and reflected on how far they had come. I'm proud of you for being so brave, Sarah told Emma. You helped make sure Daddy couldn't hurt you or any other children. Emma nodded seriously. It was scary, but it was the right thing to do. That evening, they celebrated with ice cream and Emma's favorite movie. It wasn't a celebration of what had happened to them, but rather a celebration of their survival and strength. They had faced the worst thing that could happen to a family, and they had emerged stronger and closer than ever. Emma was no longer defined by what Michael had done to her. She was a bright, talented, loving child with a future full of possibilities, and Sarah was no longer the naive woman who had believed in a perfect marriage and a perfect family. She was a survivor, a protector, and a mother who would do anything to keep her daughter safe. Their story had started with the words, "Daddy, please." A terrified child's plea for mercy from the person who should have protected her most. But it ended with new beginnings, healing, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter who had faced evil together and won.